over to Senator Burgoyne to start us off.
Thank you, Olivia, and good morning, everyone. Next week, the Idaho Senate will enter unprecedented and uncharted territory by attempting to reconvene after having made a final decision and an irrevocable decision to adjourn on May 12 of 2021 for the year. It is our view that the only way the Senate can return is on the call of the governor for a special session. And that the governor, of course, under the Constitution, would have the right to set the agenda for the Senate's work. The fact is that anyone wanting to convene the Senate next week needed to get into court, raise the constitutional issues that arise from the very unique way that the last legislative session ended, and see if the court would be willing to issue an order nullifying the Senate's decision to adjourn sine die. The Senate's received no such court order. I'm aware of no such litigation, and the House did not serve the Senate with any formal notice or even informal notice that it objected to the Senate ending its session for the year. And the Senate rules don't allow the Senate now to come back into session. And so for those reasons, everything that the legislature might do next week is going to be under a legal cloud. If legislation is purportedly passed, is it valid? Is it effective? Or does it just create uncertainty? Next week, we will be approximately 8 weeks from the beginning of a regular session that could address any issues people want to address at that time. And it raises the question, why are we creating this legal uncertainty with respect to issues that people say they want to address? Thank you very much. Turn it over to Senator Stennett.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear our thoughts about what's happening next week. I will concur with Grant as far as this is unprecedented, and we would argue again that we could have done this much more economically, because it does cost a lot to bring us all back into session. It would have been far better thought out, aside from the legal aspect of whether the Senate needed to come back or not. There was a lot of dissension amongst senators as to why we should, because for many, our sine die in May was done for the year. And if we needed to come back to concur, we'd come back for the sole purpose to concur. Understanding that the House had an ethics issue to try to take care of, but that it wasn't our issue. Also, the way it has been handled, you probably have noticed, we have been, I'll say bluntly, jerked around about whether we're coming or not coming, and if we're going to be there for the day or for the week, and what we're going to entertain or not entertain. And there has been a tremendous amount of confusion. And so the proper protocols have not been met. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Dogs in the background. Tegan, I'm here. Sorry. Heard the person outside who's trying to work on my house. So anyway, I knew something like that was going to happen. So anyway, the protocols were not. Janie, do you mind taking over?
No, I'm happy to.
Thank you, and I apologize to everybody. I had a half an hour not to be interrupted, but I guess it didn't happen. Hold on just a minute.
No, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here and have a chance to explain our point of view. And we really, we've been waiting to see what kind of legislation is going to be brought forward, and we've seen nothing. But I think at some point we finally decided, okay, if we're going to be here, if we're going to be in session for 3 to 4 days or however long, then we really ought to look at what can we do that would really make a difference for Idahoans, that would really make a difference in the lives of people here in Idaho. And one thing I'm hearing over and over again is that teachers are just about at the breaking point. Many of them are there already. In fact, I've had phone calls that they've said, will I lose my teaching certificate if I resign mid-year? That's pretty frightening to me, to think that we don't have enough quality, highly skilled teachers anyway, and then to think that we could lose some because they are just in a situation that's a no-win. People are mad, parents are mad if they're wearing masks, parents are mad if they're not wearing masks, if they have to send a student home, they're mad, if a child has to get tested, they're angry. It's a really tough situation, and we need to be doing something to ensure that these people and our frontline workers know that they're valued and that we need them and that we appreciate what they're doing. We're sitting on over $2 billion. We've allocated less than 4% of that money and spent less than 1%. So we have money to provide these essential workers, these teachers, these educational staff, bus drivers, bonuses. We don't need to be sitting on that money. And yes, I know there's some plans to spend it in the future and maybe next year do something that will help teachers, but they need help right now. And our workers need help right now. They're in a crisis situation. And so that's the RS that you're looking at, or that I assume that you have a copy of. We're going to try to do some good if we're going to be here. I don't think I agree with Senator Burgoyne and Senator Stinnett. I don't think we should be called back. I think it's unprecedented. I don't know that it's legal, but if we're going to be here, we're going to try and do something that will matter to people.
Thank you very much, Shani, and thanks. It's like, I appreciate your patience. So just to follow up, because we do want to open it up for questions, we are concerned about how the process within the building might go, and it has been a bit haphazard coming to this stage and calling us back in. We haven't had an opportunity to see any of the legislation that they are planning to entertain. I keep hearing increasing numbers of planned bills coming before us as the days go on, and we don't have a very clear picture of whether it's going to be now 12 or 30. So it really it makes us wonder if we are here to be a full-time legislature, to be here all through the week or longer. I know people had to not go. I mean, I'm missing out on a conference I'm a delegate to. Many people are. We're all trying to plan for being with our families next week. So it is untimely and expensive. It has not been done according to proper protocols. The times that we're called in, and we are pushing very hard that we have a robust discussion in our committees, as we should, and not try to push things through and against our rules, which sometimes happens, as all of you know, in the State House. But to be called back for an undetermined period of time, for an undetermined number of bills, language that we don't even have, over something that could have been done in January or is already being arbitrated in federal court, seems a really colossal waste of taxpayer money and time, when we could be doing more thoughtful policy instead of doing it in a fire drill. So I think probably we could all agree that a lot of this is perceived as being more political grandstanding and free press, and a way to make sure that ideas get in front of everybody without having solid, thoughtful policy making with good language and some robust discussion first. So it is unfortunate that we are at this stage. And I hope that that doesn't turn into something that turns into something unsafe in the Capitol building, to be honest. So we are going to be watching carefully about what's happening. We will do, hopefully, whatever we entertain will be thoughtful. And the rest of it, we just need to say no and go home. So go ahead.
I was just going to say that it appears that some of you did not receive Olivia's email yet with the legislation that we are proposing. So I thought that I would just briefly go through it with you, so that those of you who don't have it are aware of its contents. What we propose, we have a one-page bill that would mandate that the state actually spend its COVID funding to the extent that it has that money for the following: reimbursing employers for wages paid to workers for time off work for the purpose of receiving and assisting family members to receive vaccinations, to recover from any adverse reaction to COVID-19 vaccines, and to care for family members having adverse reactions to COVID vaccines. That's the first part of the bill, and it's essentially designed to clear away obstacles that do exist for those who do choose to get vaccinated. And that's something that there are COVID funds for, and that we are not currently as a state doing. The next thing is to use COVID money to enhance rapid COVID-19 testing for our citizens, including school personnel and students. It's very difficult in this environment to proceed safely and promote public health without adequate rapid COVID testing. And we're not there yet as a state. And I know we're not alone, but we've got the resources. We should be using them. We should use COVID funding from the federal government to compensate for those off work due to exposure to COVID or who have actually contracted COVID. We should have we should enhance existing mobile vaccination clinics, and we should provide in-home vaccinations for COVID vaccines. Again, clearing obstacles so that those who want vaccines can get them. We need to enhance our multilingual capabilities with respect to vaccinations. We need a sick leave bank for all public employees, including school personnel. We need to get those one-time bonus payments that are funded by federal COVID funds out to essential workers. And while the state of Idaho has done some of that, there's money sitting in the bank, so to speak, that is unused at this point, and we know that there are others who need those bonuses. We hear from employers about the inability to hire and keep workers on the job. And so essential workers obviously have a lot of problems making enough money. People aren't going to go to work to lose money. And that's one way we can help to overcome that situation. And finally, there's something that's a little complicated in the law, but the fact is that you can't sue a pharmaceutical company if a vaccine injures you. The federal government says you can't do that. You have to make a claim with the federal vaccine injury compensation fund. And that fund, unfortunately, and there have been a lot of articles on this, has become pretty dysfunctional. We need to use whatever COVID funds that we have that we can use to establish a state vaccine injury compensation fund for people. That's only fair. And so that's what our legislation would do. It would say we've got the money, to the extent that we've got these federal COVID funds, get it out the door, get it out there now. Let's use that money while it's needed, and let's help our people. Going off and suing the federal government. You might expect me to say, well, that's tilting at windmills. Well, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has responded to the suit by entering a temporary stay insofar as President Biden's vaccine mandate orders relate to private sector employment. And there is a Democratic governor of the state of Kansas that has signed on to that lawsuit. And so to some extent it is bipartisan. And, if the courts find that he exceeded his authority, obviously they're going to enjoin that. But regardless of how that suit comes out, regardless of that, these are the basic things that Idaho should have already done. And it'd be interesting if you look at the state of Kansas and what the governor there has done. They've done a lot of things that we're not doing to promote vaccination. And lip service from state officials encouraging vaccination is one thing, but real action to clear out the roadblocks to vaccination is what we need to be doing. Thank you.
And Grant, if I can just add a little bit of information about why that sick leave bank is important, a statewide sick leave bank. Many state employees and educators mostly, get a day a month, so nine sick leave days a year. Well, if you contract COVID, you're out for 10 days. You've used all of your sick leave for the year. Or if you have to quarantine because you've been exposed, you've used your sick leave. And the same is true with state employees. I think they get one a month, so it may end up being 12. But you can run through your sick leave very quickly in a situation where there's a pandemic, and especially if you're being exposed every day to children that may have been exposed. It's very difficult. And some districts have provided a level of support for this, but other districts have not. We need to have it consistent. And if we just have this statewide sick leave bank where if somebody's ill, the administrator, the agency, or the district can apply and get that money to cover the sub or whatever you need to, and then the person gets to keep their sick leave for that if they've been exposed to COVID or have to quarantine.
So questions?
If you want to use the raise your hand tool or just unmute yourself or use the chat, just whatever is easiest for you. But yes, go ahead and start asking questions and we will get those answered.
And Olivia, will you get that, resend that email with the legislation so that these
Yes,
folks have?
it will go out after the conference, and a PDF of it is in the chat as well.
Okay, I apologize. I can't find the raise your hand tool. This is Betsy Russell with the Idaho Press. It sounds like in some ways you are saying that you want to have it both ways. Senator Burgoyne is saying it's illegal, it's improper to convene this session, but on the other hand, you're putting forth legislation to be considered in this session. Which position is it?
Well, I think we recognize both. I mean, if ultimately what happens in this session is that our legislation is passed and the courts find that this legislation or that this session was not lawfully convened, obviously we will need to do the legislation again. But I think the point is, yes, we don't think that this session is legal.
No.
However, we're going to be here anyway. And the Republicans are going to be putting up legislation. We might as well put up this single piece of legislation and try to pass it. And if it passes, I think we'll probably in January want to pass it again, just to make sure that it in fact is law.
Yeah, and I think that you know, I would just echo the fact that we often come to the Senate and the rules are not followed. You know, they vote to suspend them or to change the rules, and so we're left trying to navigate through that system. But you know, we do the best we can, and if we're going to be here and they're going to present legislation, I'd like to see if we can do something that's really positive for children and parents and citizens of Idaho.
I think it's also important that people understand that Senate Democrats are not just going to sit on their hands and not say anything. And this legislation is an important way to say something, and that is, let's be real about what we can do to take on this pandemic. Political grandstanding is not the way to deal with the problems that everyday Idahoans are facing because of this pandemic.
Ruth?
Hi there, this is Ruth Brown with Idaho Public Television. I had a question regarding the bill that you plan to propose. It outlines it as COVID-related funding. I'm wondering which package that is. There was ARPA, CARES, and several other funding federal funding packages. Which one specifically are you trying to target? If you could walk me through that.
Oh, thanks for that question. That's a good question. To the extent that there's any CARES Act funding left that can support support that agenda. This bill requires it be used. The ARPA funding as well. So basically, if there is federal COVID money available, this legislation is saying it needs to be used to support these activities.
And like-
probably the CARES money first, because that will expire.
Mhm.
And so we have much longer to use the ARPA money. But if you look at the ARPA guidelines, there's money available to address all these issues in that act. So if the CARES money is used up, we can certainly use the ARPA money. It's available and it's there and it's outlined that it can be used for this.
And from what I understand with the ARPA, we've only spent 4% of it. And so where we have a lot of immediate need that we're talking about, that it needs to be considered sooner than later to make sure that we make it through the winter and provide for particularly those that are doing the service providing for us, whether they're healthcare sector or schools, or they're very much struggling. And so we're just trying to make sure they understand that there are various deadlines on some of it, but some of it can be facilitated almost immediately. And so we should be paying attention to that because it's in the best interest of our workers.
Thank you.
Kevin? And then Betsy.
Yes, I understand that you're talking about spending CARES Act money and ARPA money, but how much money are we talking about spending for these various initiatives?
You know, we've got $1.1 billion in the ARPA funds that as Senator Stennett said, we've only allocated 4% and spent 1% of that. So there's quite a bit of money. I think we did not set the amount on the bonuses, but I can tell you that if we gave every teacher in the state $1,000 bonus, it would be about $20 million. To set up the sick leave bank, it's no cost really to set it up, but that would only go to people that actually come in contact with COVID and are ill and need to be at home, or that they are quarantined. I think that was done last year, and there were some figures on that, but that could change. And with people being vaccinated, it's probably going to be much lower. So we don't have a set fund, a set amount. What we're saying is, let's look at these issues. Let's see, we've got money available, and let's prioritize them and get some of them done.
The fact is, Kevin, that there are millions upon millions of dollars available that in terms of COVID-related spending that the state of Idaho is authorized to do with federal money. And we have spent a small fraction of it. There is much more that Idahoans need. This legislation will give the governor and his people the authority to get out there and start using that money to help them overcome their problems.
And if you look at the ARPA Act and you look at, there's a section category B, and it says, we have the ability to provide premium pay of up to $13 per hour in addition to an employee's base pay to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 health emergency. And it goes on to list those workers, and it says janitors and sanitation workers, truck drivers, bus drivers, educators and other school staff, childcare workers, social service. So that we know that money's available, and we know that it was allocated to be used right now during the pandemic to address some of these essential worker needs. And we're just sitting on it, and I don't think that's appropriate.
It took me a minute, Kevin, to come up with the number, but some of the staff work that was done to get this bill ready indicated that we could spend, not that the money's available at this level, but we could spend in terms of payments to essential workers, perhaps as much as $25 billion in Idaho to fully meet the need. Now, the level of funding doesn't fully meet that need, but every dollar that we've got in COVID funding that we can use for that purpose, we should use.
My question is, I'm hearing only the Senate Democrats speaking at this news conference today. Do you also represent the views of your colleagues in the House, or are they taking a different approach on the session reconvening on Monday?
Well, I can tell you that I sat in with discussions with them, and I mean, they had to come back because they recessed and they have an ethics issue they have to reconvene for. In technical terms, all they needed to do was come back for that and make sure that they have finished before the end of the year their determination on the ethics situation, and then adjourn, sine die. But this has created, and I can't speak for everyone, but it is my understanding that they don't want to see most of what is going to be coming before them, because like us, they believe that there is already a federal mechanism happening right now. And also much of this could have been addressed in January. We're not that far away from being back in a regular session next year. In fact, some of the things that are left on our calendar on both House and Senate side can't even be entertained if they're hoping to pull things that were still on the calendars when we adjourned, because that we are no longer in the 2021 fiscal cycle. We're now in a 2022 fiscal cycle. So anything that has a 2021 date or a 2021 budget piece to it is obsolete. And so there just was a lot of question, aside from making sure that we can just grandstand on a couple of issues. And now it sounds like if the number of bills are expanding, which is what I heard, then everybody can just bring everything out that they want to talk about instead of even keeping it more topic sensitive. Then this is something that we, instead of springing it on fairly last minute, because nobody's seen the language on most of this stuff, should have been properly transparent, like what we're doing with our bill, brought forward so people can have some heads up and read through it, so that when it's presented to them on the floor in their committees, that they have some idea of what kind of dialogue we should have about it and do some homework on it. We just don't see any of that happening.
And Betsy, I might just say on that I've had some discussions and seen some positions taken by House Democrats with respect to all-day kindergarten and the grants for pre-K that were brought up in the last regular legislative session and did not get through. And those are two additional items that I think both House and Senate Democrats are committed to. And those would provide, again, real solutions to real problems. And to the extent that the Republicans are going to purport to pass legislation this next week, those ought to be on the list and those ought to go through.
So are there any other questions from folks? If not, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again for joining us and for asking questions. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.